audience, I want you to meet Steve Castile. He's a small business owner from Urbandale, Iowa, who serves on the Iowa Restaurant Association board, and he's a Republican. Steve?
Hi, Steve.
Good evening, Ambassador.
Good
Thank you for being here in Iowa.
Of course.
So my question is, small business owners have seen skyrocketing costs over the last couple of years. What policies or incentives will you put in place to help curb these rising costs?
Well, first of all, small businesses are the heartbeat of our economy. And if you take care of your small businesses, you do take care of your economy. But the problem is Washington, D.C. hasn't taken care of any of us. You know, I will say that it's easy for us to go and say, oh, Biden did that to us. And Biden did do a lot of harm to us. But I've always spoken in hard truths, and I'm going to do that with you today. Our Republicans did that to us, too. The idea that they passed a $2.2 trillion COVID stimulus bill with no accountability whatsoever, expanding welfare. Now we have 90 million Americans on Medicaid, 42 million Americans on food stamps. If that wasn't enough, they doubled down and opened up earmarks for the first time in 10 years. They pushed through 7,000 of them in December. Want to know how they're spending your money? $30 million on an honors college in Vermont, $10 million to bring down a hotel in Alaska, $7.5 million on a courthouse in Colorado. That's not how we want to spend our money. All while 1 in 6 American households can't pay their utility bill, 60% of Americans are in credit card debt. And then you've got Social Security, which is going to go bankrupt in 10 years. Medicare is going to go bankrupt in 8 years. We've got to make sure that we go back to being fiscally responsible. So what does that look like? What that looks like is, let's start by clawing back the $500 billion of unspent COVID dollars that we know are out there. Instead of the 87,000 IRS workers going after middle America, let's go after the hundreds of billions of dollars of COVID fraud that we know exist. Let's make sure that if we understand that 8% of our budget is interest, quit borrowing, cut up the credit cards. When I was governor of South Carolina, I had to balance a budget. You have to balance a budget. Why is Congress the only group that doesn't have to balance a budget? When I am president, we will stop the spending, we will stop the borrowing, we will stop the earmarks, and I will veto any spending bill that doesn't take us back to pre-COVID levels. That's how we'll take care of things today.
So let me just ask you, on the subject of the economy, the economy just added 339,000 jobs last month, according to BLS. Inflation has been high, but it is showing signs of slowing. Wages have continued to rise. Do you think President Biden deserves any credit for any of that?
Well, I think look at the cash infiltration into our economy. Everybody saw that. I mean, you basically paid people to sit on the couch. You've got all of this money that was spent with no accountability. So, yes, is the unemployment coming down? But ask those small business owners, because they're not feeling it on their bottom line. Costs are still high. And you can ask families. You know it when you go to the grocery store. You know it when you have to get something repaired on your car. Everything has gone up. So the unemployment rate, that's great that we can say that we've got a lot of people working. But what good is that when you can actually see that 50% of Americans are saying that they're worse off today than they were a year ago, and they're not making as much money? That's the problem. That's why it's important to understand I'm not a lawyer, I'm an accountant, and I think it's time we had an accountant in the White House.